Imagine being handed a death sentence disguised as a dare. That is exactly what happened to a young man named Perseus, and the man who gave it to him was absolutely certain he would never come back alive. The story begins on the rocky island of Seriphos, where a king named Polydectes had developed an obsession with Perseus's mother, Danae. Perseus stood in the way of that obsession, and Polydectes needed him gone. So during a grand feast, the king announced that every guest must bring him a gift of horses. Perseus, who had nothing, rashly promised to bring back anything the king named, even the head of the Gorgon Medusa. Polydectes smiled. He had his wish. But to understand why that promise was a death sentence, you have to understand what Perseus was walking into. Medusa was one of three Gorgon sisters, monstrous creatures whose gaze could freeze any living thing into stone in an instant. Heroes far older and stronger than Perseus had gone looking for her. None returned. The island paths toward the edge of the known world were littered, at least in legend, with the stone shapes of men who had tried and failed. Perseus had no map, no armor, no weapon capable of the task, and no plan. What he did have, though he did not yet know it, was the attention of two Olympian gods who rarely agreed on anything. His half-sister Athena and the cunning Hermes had been watching, and gods with a vested interest in a young hero have a way of showing up exactly when they are needed most. Hermes arrived first, materializing on the road with that easy confidence only a god of travelers could carry. He did not offer empty encouragement. He offered intelligence. He told Perseus that before he could even hope to find the Gorgons, he needed to locate the Graea, three ancient sisters who shared a single eye and a single tooth between them. They alone knew the location of the nymphs who held the tools Perseus would need. Then Athena appeared beside her divine half-brother, and she made her own contribution, a polished bronze shield that gleamed like a mirror. She gave Perseus a critical piece of advice along with it. Never look directly at Medusa. Use the reflection in the shield to guide your blade, because the moment your eyes meet hers directly, you become stone. With those directions and that single shining shield, Perseus set off to find the Graea at the edge of the world, in a land so far from Greece that the sun barely bothered to rise there. He found them huddled on a grey cliff, three ancient hags wrapped in mist, passing their single clouded eye back and forth with brittle, deliberate hands. Perseus watched their rhythm, learned their timing, and at the precise moment the eye was in transit between two sisters, he snatched it from the air. The sisters screamed and threatened, but Perseus held firm. He would return the eye only when they told him where to find the nymphs. Cornered, furious, and effectively blind, they told him everything. It was his first victory, one not with muscle, but with patience and nerve, a combination that would define this hero more than brute strength ever could. The nymphs of the north were nothing like the terrifying Graea. They were generous, even delighted to meet the young son of Zeus, and what they gave him transformed an ordinary man into something capable of the extraordinary. First came winged sandals, the kind Hermes himself was famous for, able to carry the wearer across any distance at breathtaking speed. Then came a magical satchel called a kibisis, a bag that could safely contain any object no matter how dangerous or destructive, because no ordinary container could hold the severed head of a Gorgon without disaster following close behind. Finally, from either the nymphs or Hermes, depending on which ancient source you follow, Perseus received the Cap of Darkness, the very helmet that belonged to Hades, lord of the underworld, which rendered the wearer completely invisible to any gaze. Perseus was now armed in a way no mortal had ever been. He lifted into the air on those winged sandals and turned toward the far reaches of the world, guided at last to the land where the Gorgons slept. When he arrived, he found the three sisters lying among the stone remnants of creatures and men who had fallen before him, a grim reminder of the stakes. Two of the sisters, Stheno and Euryale, were immortal. Medusa alone was not, though she was arguably the most powerful. Her face was surrounded by living serpents for hair, her skin was bronze, and her stare was absolute death. Perseus hovered above her sleeping form, held the mirrored shield at a careful angle, and watched her reflection rather than her face directly. He saw exactly where she lay. He saw the rise and fall of her chest. Then he drew his blade and acted. The blade came down in a single, decisive arc. Perseus kept his gaze fixed on the bronze reflection the entire time, never once allowing his eyes to stray toward the real thing. The moment the head was severed, two extraordinary things burst from Medusa's neck that no myth teller ever quite explains away. A fully grown winged horse named Pegasus, and a golden giant named Chrysaor. These were the children of Medusa and Poseidon, god of the sea, conceived long before the curse that transformed her, and they had been waiting inside her all this time. Perseus had no use for either of them in that moment. He scooped Medusa's head into the kibyssus without looking at it directly, pulled the cap of darkness over his head, and vanished from sight just as Stheno and Euryale woke with a shriek that rattled the earth. They could not see him. They circled and screamed and tore at the air, but their prey was already invisible and airborne, climbing higher above their frantic searching. Perseus flew south and east across the ocean, the weight of the most dangerous object in the world hanging in that bag at his side. Along the way, drops of Medusa's blood fell through the fabric and hit the Libyan desert far below, where they transformed instantly into venomous serpents that would plague that land forever, a detail ancient Greeks used to explain why the Saharan regions were so infamous for deadly snakes. Perseus barely noticed. He had survived the impossible thing. But survival and completion are two very different categories, and the journey home had one more enormous test waiting for him along the coast of a place called Ethiopia. Perseus was crossing the Ethiopian coastline when he looked down and saw something that stopped him cold. A young woman chained to a rock at the ocean's edge, the waves crashing around her, and something vast moving beneath the surface of the water toward her. Her name was Andromeda, Princess of Ethiopia, and she was there because her mother, Cassiopeia, had boasted that Andromeda was more beautiful than the sea nymphs themselves. The sea nymphs were not the forgiving type. They complained to Poseidon, who sent a massive sea monster called Cetus to devastate the coastline. An oracle told the king there was only one way to end the destruction: chain his daughter to that rock as a sacrifice. Perseus landed in front of her, made a swift deal with her desperate parents that he would save her in exchange for her hand in marriage, and then turned to face Cetus as it rose from the waves. Some tellings say he used Medusa's head to turn the monster to stone on the spot. Others say he fought it with his divine blade for an exhausting, furious battle in the shallows. In every version, Cetus lost. Perseus freed Andromeda, married her over the objections of a scorned former suitor who started a fight at the wedding, and was dealt with swiftly by yet another glance at that terrible bag. When Perseus finally returned to Seriphos, he found that King Polydectes had been tormenting his mother Danae in his absence. Perseus walked straight into the king's hall, announced that he had kept his promise, and showed Polydectes exactly what he had brought back. One more statue joined the world that day. If this story gripped you, hit like and subscribe, because every week we dive into myths just as wild, just as vivid, and just as unforgettable as this one.